So the storytelling structure used in many Studio Ghibli films, which gives them their emotionally different feel, is the same structure I've naturally and instinctively used in my sleep stories for over 20 years. A few years back, when I wrote a book about how to craft sleep stories and healing narratives, I started looking into the structure of my stories and discovered something called Kishōtenketsu, which is a storytelling structure with roots going back over 1,000 years. Once you learn about this structure, you start seeing it everywhere in Studio Ghibli films, slice of life anime, and also in many of my sleep stories. I think one reason my sleep stories feel so different from a lot of modern storytelling, and also why they're often so effective and absorbing, is because they have this structure. Rather than being built around a typical Western structure containing conflict, obstacles, villains, high stakes, and constant escalation, Kishōtenketsu works through curiosity, exploration, atmosphere, discovery, and new understanding. So the structure has 4 stages: Ki, Shu, Ten, and Ketsu, which roughly means introduction, development, turn, and conclusion. The key stage is about immersion. It's about helping you emotionally enter or settle into the world of the story. In My Neighbor Totoro, the key section involves the family moving into the countryside. Miyazaki spends a huge amount of time simply letting you exist in that world. The old house, the trees moving in the wind, dust floating in sunlight, opening doors, exploring empty rooms, cooking, walking. In Spirited Away, Miyazaki is a little more flexible with the structure, but it's still present. We spend time driving through unfamiliar roads, walking through abandoned spaces, looking at empty restaurants, watching Chihiro react emotionally to the environment. These films are teaching you how this world feels before it fully explains what the world is. Most Hollywood films would rush through this to get to the plot, but Ghibli films linger there. And my sleep stories work similarly. For example, in the magical ancient woodland, the opening is simply mist on a river, slow kayaking, birds waking, woodland sounds, camping beside the river. The focus is on helping you to settle into the world emotionally. In my sleep story, Delivering the Magic Spell, the opening is simply resting beside a stream, watching leaves drift past, sheltering from rain, a dog lying beside you, setting up a tent. Again, the story isn't rushing towards conflict, it's creating atmosphere, rhythm, and emotional safety. The next stage is show. This is usually the largest part of the story. This is where the world deepens through lived experience, often through observation, exploration, routine, relationships, and discovery. In My Neighbor Totoro, most of the middle of the film is just really the girls settling into countryside life, going to school, exploring paths, meeting neighbors, watching the rain, encountering strange creatures, playing. Totoro himself doesn't really drive the plot. He feels more like an emotional presence connected to wonder, childhood, and nature. And in Spirited Away, most of the film is Chihiro learning the rules of the bathhouse, meeting unusual beings, working, observing, adapting to the spirit world. In my sleep story, The Magical Ancient Woodland, the development stage is the journey, kayaking along a river through woodland, stopping for lunch, watching clouds, camping in the trees, listening to the river and insects at night. The deeper the journey goes, the more the forest begins feeling almost dreamlike. And in Delivering the Magic Spell, the middle of the story unfolds through walking, camping, foraging, making soup, travelling with a horse, resting beside campfires, moving through rain and woodland. The growth of the story happens through accumulated experience. The next stage is 10. This is where a turn happens. The turn is rarely a dramatic plot twist or a twist based on threat, challenge, or conflict. It's more often a shift in understanding. Something becomes recontextualized. The world hasn't necessarily changed, but the meaning of the world changes. In My Neighbor Totoro, the real turn isn't that Totoro exists. Totoro appears quite early and is accepted, even if initially the sister and father can't see him. The real turn is when the magical world and the emotional world begin merging together. This happens at the bus stop. From this point on, the sisters have access to both worlds. In Spirited Away, I actually think the real turn is the train journey. The pace suddenly slows, the film becomes reflective and melancholic, and the spirit world stops feeling like simply a strange fantasy setting. It starts feeling symbolic, emotional, almost dreamlike. Chihiro now understands herself differently within the world. She's no longer scared or uncertain, but taking control of her actions and desires. In my sleep story, The Magical Ancient Woodland, the turn happens when the traveller leaves the river and enters the ancient part of the woodland, with the glowing moss, the humming trees, the chiming branches, and encountering the fairy. And gradually, the traveller realizes the forest was never just scenery. It was always a connected, living system. They simply didn't perceive it that way before. And in developing the magic spell, the turn happens when the traveller drinks the mushroom soup and suddenly understands the dog and horse. Earlier in the story, the animals feel like companions, but after this moment, they become conscious beings with their own inner experiences that she can communicate with and understand. The journey changes from traveling through landscape to understanding the living world around you differently. And the final stage is Ketsu, the conclusion. Kishōtenketsu conclusions often feel very different from Western endings. They're usually less about victory or overcoming something and more about integration. The character returns to ordinary life, but now carries a different understanding. At the end of My Neighbor Totoro, nothing is fully solved in the Hollywood sense. Their mother is still ill, but emotionally the girls have adapted and grown. At the end of Spirited Away, Chihiro returns to the ordinary world, but she's calmer, more grounded, more emotionally capable. There's a reflective feel to the ending. At the end of my sleep story, The Magical Ancient Woodland, the traveller leaves the forest and returns home. But now the ordinary world feels different. Everything feels more vivid and connected than before. The magic didn't create the connection. It revealed something that was already there. And in delivering the magic spell, the traveller delivers the spell successfully, but the real conclusion isn't simply that the task is complete. It's that the journey itself changed how the traveller experiences the world. The journey has expanded their perspective, understanding and experience of how connected all things are. I create my sleep stories by imagining a character in a world, absorbing myself in that character and in their experience, and then I ad-lib the story which unfolds naturally for that character in that world, describing their experiences as they unfold. As a therapist, first and foremost, my stories have always been made to be therapeutic, predominantly to help with stress, worry, and anxiety while helping the listener to sleep. And the Kishōtenketsu structure naturally works well for this, which is why I seem to have instinctively told stories with this structure since I began creating therapeutic sleep stories over 20 years ago. My earliest sleep story for grown-ups was Adventure of a Prince, a story I created back in 2004. I knew that the structure I used didn't match traditional storytelling beats. There was no real conflict, or obstacle, but I didn't know at the time that there existed a 1,000-year-old East Asian storytelling structure which I was instinctively very close to matching with my storytelling. I just wanted to take a few moments to share that first story from the perspective of Kishōtenketsu, and then share some examples from other more recent stories of mine through this lens. So, the adventure of a prince starts with the prince in a palace. The key stage establishes the location, characters, and thoughts of the prince, including the observations leading to his desire to leave the palace. The show stage explores his journey from the palace. He leaves the palace early in the morning, traveling through the land, learning as he continues his journey. During his journey, he has an experience he doesn't yet understand. This is like a mini 10 stage in the middle of the show stage. Like many Kishōtenketsu stories, the meaning of this moment is delayed. The show stage continues, and similar to Spirited Away, the story at this point deviates slightly from the Kishōtenketsu structure. This is for therapeutic reasons. The prince has a sense of being followed. There isn't any antagonist or conflict. However, the prince does start being uncertain. So the threat is the prince's own thoughts, not reality. They perceive danger before discovering that what was following them was a wolf which is actually there to guide them. The main 10 stage happens when the prince reaches a mountaintop cave, and the wolf shares wisdom with them, telling them that they already have learned what they need. They just don't yet know that they know it. The wolf explains that they can return inwardly to this cave whenever they need to and can explore many viewpoints. This moment offers new understanding on the entire journey. The problem they thought they had when they set off from the palace doesn't get solved by finding an external answer. It's solved by gaining perspective, exploring calmness, developing trust and wisdom, and accessing inner guidance. The Ketsu stage involves the prince leaping from the cave, becoming an eagle, flying high above the land, swooping down close to the ground and across the forest towards the palace. They see the world in a new way, with multiple viewpoints. They fly back to the palace a changed person who no longer carries the problem they set off with. Nothing in the world has technically changed. It's their inner world which has shifted. Taking a look at a recent story, the reality-shifting teddy bear, this story is driven almost entirely by altering understanding through expanding layers of reality. The story unfolds like nested dream loops, where a 10 stage leads to a mini Ketsu stage, followed by a new 10, then new Ketsu, until finally resolving. This allows for the story to carry its therapeutic elements and gradually build and deepen. On the surface, the story seems to be about a teddy bear scientist who investigates multiversal tears caused by Nikola Tesla. But really, it's about permeability between realities, consciousness, imagination, inner experience becoming outer reality, and transcendence beyond physical limitations. In the story, the key stage involves an underwater descent, descending through layers of water and thermal boundaries before entering a cave system and approaching a portal. This begins introducing the idea of layered reality, crossing thresholds, the mind slowing, the descending into sleep. The listener is becoming primed for the idea of a multiverse before I start talking about any multiverse. The show stage has the teddy enter a reality where they meet Tesla. This stage involves the teddy expanding their understanding. The story seems like it'll be going in one direction. Tesla's machine is dangerous and this needs to be stopped, but then shifts to collaborative exploration of the situation. There's a new understanding of the situation, sidestepping conflict and instead focusing on curiosity. Tesla reveals his imagination ability, shifting the focus from the physical technology, where you might think the story would focus, to the power of inner consciousness. The show stage progressively expands the listener's understanding that realities overlap, consciousness interacts with them, imagination affects reality, and physicality may not be the primary focus of reality. The 10 stage isn't about Tesla's machine traveling through portals or revealing multiverses. It's about an encounter which happens. Up until this point in the story, everything follows the same logic, but an encounter with the gorilla monk changes that. They offer new meaning. They reveal that consciousness itself is the portal. This completely reinterprets Tesla's work, the machine, the multiverse, even Teddy's journey. The story moves from external mechanisms to inner transcendence. The Ketsu stage wraps up with the Teddy returning to their regular world, sharing their knowledge and practicing what they've learned. Another sleep story of mine from just a few weeks ago is Relaxing in the Garden. This story contains two Kishōtenketsu layers. It contains a frame story and an inner story. The frame story involves the story listener, you, as a garden reader. The key stage involves you relaxing in a peaceful garden. The shoe stage develops this further, from being aware of the experience of being in that garden, relaxing, having something to eat and drink, and beginning to read a book. The 10 stage progresses to you absorbing yourself in reading the story in that book, where you go from resting in a garden and experiencing reality to absorbing yourself in a fantasy tale that shifts your experiences and your understandings, giving you things to think about. Then the Ketsu stage has you finish reading, focusing back on the evening in the garden before heading to bed. Within this, because I introduce reading a book, I have this same structure play out in the story within that book that you're reading, an inner story within that outer frame story. This story is about a misunderstood ogre who lives in a dark forest. The key stage has the ogre sent on a quest by a wizard. Part of the quest is to find magical glasses and to bring light to the darkness of the forest. The ogre has been chosen specifically because of who they are. They've experienced prejudice, being misunderstood, not having their true skills recognized by others. The show stage has the ogre traveling through different landscapes, meeting different characters. They meet a raccoon, a wise owl, a painting cow. They visit a desert, a river, a town, an inn, taking shelter from rain, and visit a castle on a hill. The cow they meet is painting a landscape. This cow presents the idea that all things are connected, and deeper perception allows deeper understanding. Through the ogre's journey, they gradually develop more meaning from their accumulated knowledge and experiences. The 10 stage has the ogre reach ruins where they find a hidden chamber. Within the chamber, they find the magical glasses and discover that they aren't spectacles as they thought they were going to be, but rather drinking glasses to be used in a ritual. The ogre follows the ritual, drinking a liquid and having an experience. The Ketsu stage concludes with that experience, leading to them understanding why they were chosen, understanding about universal wisdom, inner healing, and greater connection with the world around them, enabling them to bring light back to the dark forest. I find the Kishōtenketsu storytelling structure used in Studio Ghibli stories is a structure that instinctively resonates with me and how I naturally develop and tell therapeutic sleep stories. Miyazaki is well known for not fully scripting his films in a conventional sense before production begins. He starts storyboarding and has the story develop through the storyboarding. Both Miyazaki and myself create emergent stories. The stories aren't fully scripted. They emerge through the process of exploring the world. The stories unfold organically through curiosity and exploration, rather than forcing them to hit plot beats. Kishōtenketsu is a beautiful storytelling structure, allowing for organic and natural feeling stories which evolve and grow through curiosity and wonder rather than conflict and obstacles, and a structure I wish more stories were created around. If you're interested in checking out any of my therapeutic sleep stories, I have hundreds of them on my channel and create more every week. Thanks for watching.